This episode is a must-watch for anyone interested in stories that challenge social norms and stereotypes. It also highlights the importance of self-respect and the courage to stand up for oneself, even in the face of adversity.
Rich mother humiliates son's black girlfriend and is shocked to discover she's a powerful CEO. The Metropolitan Club's ballroom shone like a starry sky on that October night. Venetian crystals hung from the ceiling in luminous cascades, reflecting the golden light that enveloped the guests in an aura of prestige. Helena Montero, in her champagne-colored Valentino dress, looked on with satisfaction at the results of months of meticulous planning. The Montero family's annual charity gala was once again the most eagerly awaited event of the Manhattan social season. Her blue-gray eyes, inherited from Portuguese ancestors, scanned the hall with the precision of a radar. Every detail had been personally supervised: the white orchids imported from Thailand, the strategic arrangement of the tables occupied by the most influential names on the East Coast, the musical selection performed by the New York Philharmonic. Everything was perfect, as it should be. "Helena, darling, you've exceeded all expectations this year," whispered Beatrice Wellington, approaching with her glass of champagne. "The governor can't stop praising the organization." Helena smiled, that restrained smile that had become her trademark over the last 30 years of social life. "It's for a good cause, Beatrice. The new Children's Cancer Center needs all the support it can get." But her attention was soon caught by a movement near the main entrance. Daniel, her only son, had just arrived. At 32, he was the embodiment of what Helena had always dreamed of: tall, elegant, successful as a heart surgeon at Presbyterian Hospital. Her pride, however, froze the moment her eyes caught sight of the woman next to him. The stranger wore a red dress that flowed like water, highlighting her satiny black skin. Her natural hair formed a crown of well-defined curls, adorned with discreet diamond earrings. There was a dignity in her posture that, even from a distance, emanated a disturbing strength. "Who's that with Daniel?" Beatrice's voice oozed barely concealed curiosity. Helena felt her stomach turn. In 30 years of organizing charity events, she knew every important family on the East Coast, every last name that mattered, and that woman was a complete stranger. Daniel led his escort through the hall, greeting acquaintances with natural ease. Helena watched in horror as some of the most important guests seemed genuinely impressed by the stranger. When the couple finally approached, Helena had to summon every ounce of her self-control to maintain her composure. "Mum," Daniel smiled, his eyes shining in a way Helena hadn't seen for years. "I want you to meet Carolina. This is my mother, Helena Montero." Carolina held out her hand gracefully. "It's a pleasure to finally meet you, Mrs. Montero. Daniel talks about you a lot." Her accent was impeccable, her diction perfect, but Helena could only see what didn't belong there. Not in that environment. Not with her son. "Oh," Helena replied, ignoring the outstretched hand and arching an eyebrow. "I imagine so. Daniel has always been generous in sharing our family life." Her tone was as sharp as ice. Carolina's smile faltered for a split second, but she kept her posture. Daniel, on the other hand, stiffened visibly. "Carolina is a surprise, certainly," Helena interrupted, her voice rising slightly. "I didn't know you'd bring a chaperone tonight, Daniel, especially for such an important event. The guest lists were carefully drawn up months ago." The silence that followed was deafening. A few nearby guests began to pay attention to the scene that was unfolding. "Actually," Carolina spoke, her voice calm but firm, "I received a formal invitation through the foundation I represent. I believe we have made a significant contribution to the new cancer center." Helena felt her blood run cold. How could she not have checked the list of donors herself? "Well," she forced an artificial smile, "surely there must be some mistake. Perhaps some assistant—" "There's no mistake, Mom," Daniel intervened, his voice tense. "Carolina is the CEO of Tech Care Solutions. Her company developed the diagnostic software that will be implemented in the new center." Helena's world began to spin. Tech Care Solutions was one of the most promising technology companies at the moment, revolutionizing diagnostic medicine. She had personally insisted that representatives of the company be present at the event. "Excuse me," Carolina said softly. "I think I need some fresh air." Before Daniel could react, she had already walked away gracefully, leaving behind only the faint scent of her perfume and a tension-filled silence. Carolina crossed the Metropolitan Club terrace with measured steps, her hands discreetly gripping the marble railing. The cold October air kissed her face, providing momentary relief from the heat of humiliation that still burned in her cheeks. Down below, the lights of Manhattan twinkled like earthly stars, indifferent to the drama unfolding above. Closing her eyes, she let her mind wander back to 10 years ago, when she was still a computer science student at MIT. Determined to prove her worth in a world that constantly questioned her presence, Miss Montero's words had awakened memories she preferred to keep dormant. "You don't belong here." That phrase, whispered by a colleague during her first presentation in the graduate program, now echoed with painful familiarity. At the time, Carolina had swallowed her tears and continued her presentation on medical diagnostic algorithms. That project would be the seed of tech care solutions. "I thought I'd find you here." Daniel's voice broke through her thoughts. He approached, offering his jacket. "Are you shivering?" "I'm fine," she replied automatically, but accepted the jacket, enveloping herself in its warmth and the familiar scent of sandalwood that Daniel always wore. "No, you're not, and nor should she be." He ran his hand through his dark hair, a gesture Carolina already knew as a sign of his frustration. Her behavior was unacceptable. "I would never." "Daniel," Carolina interrupted him softly, "your mother isn't the first person to judge me for the color of my skin, and she probably won't be the last." The silence that followed was filled with the distant sound of the city and the music leaking from the hall. Carolina watched Daniel's profile against the illuminated horizon, remembering the day they met, 8 months ago, during a medical conference in Boston. "You know what's ironic?" she continued, turning to face the city. "When I started tech care, one of my main goals was to democratize access to cutting-edge medical technology. I grew up watching my grandmother, Donna Conceição, clean the houses of wealthy families to pay for my studies. She died of a cancer that could have been detected early if she'd had access to proper tests." Daniel moved closer, wrapping her in a side hug. "You never told me that." "There are many things I don't tell you, Daniel, not because I'm ashamed, but because some memories still hurt too much." Carolina took a deep breath, feeling the cold air fill her lungs. "When I founded the company, I promised myself that I would create accessible technology for people like my grandmother. Now, 5 years later, our software is being implemented in public hospitals across the country. And that's why you're extraordinary," Daniel whispered, turning her to face him. "You've turned your pain into purpose." Carolina smiled sadly. "Your mother doesn't see that. She only sees an intruder, someone who doesn't belong in her world." "She's wrong," Daniel stated vehemently, "and I'm going to make her see that." At that moment, the sound of heels on marble announced someone's arrival. Beatrice Wellington emerged from the shadows, her face betraying a mixture of embarrassment and curiosity. "Carolina, dear," she began, her voice sugary, "Helena is looking for you. Dinner will be served soon." Daniel tensed visibly, but Carolina put a hand on his arm, calming him down. "Thank you, Mrs. Wellington. We'll be there in a moment." After Beatrice left, Carolina adjusted her dress and straightened her shoulders. "Let's go back." "Are you sure?" Daniel asked, concern evident in his eyes. "My grandmother always said, 'Hold your head high, my child. Dignity isn't begged for, it's earned.'" Carolina smiled, this time with determination. "Besides, I have a speech to make about the new software. I didn't just come here as your date, I came as the CEO of Tech Care." As they walked back to the lounge, Carolina felt the familiar weight of responsibility on her shoulders. It wasn't just about her now. It was about all the black girls who dreamed of entering the world of technology, about her grandmother who never had adequate access to healthcare, about breaking down barriers that had persisted for generations. Helena Montero may have had social power, but Carolina had something much more valuable, purpose, and no prejudice in the world could take that away from her. Helena watched the hall with a plastic smile frozen on her lips as her internal world fell apart. The news of who Carolina really was had spread like wildfire among the guests. Now, every sidelong glance, every hushed whisper behind glasses of champagne felt like a silent indictment of her social gaffe. "Tech Care Solutions has revolutionized the early diagnosis of cancer," commented Dr. Maxwell Richardson, director of Presbyterian Hospital, approaching with his wife. "Ms. Carolina is a prodigy. She has achieved what entire research teams have been trying to do for decades." Helena swallowed, keeping her composure. "Fascinating," she replied mechanically, her eyes fixed on her son and Carolina, who had just returned from the terrace. Dinner was served amid a buzz of animated conversation. Carolina was sitting at the main table, exactly where Helena had planned to put the senator's daughter. The irony of the situation didn't escape her. The woman she had tried to humiliate now occupied one of the most prestigious positions at the event. TechCare's shares have soared 300% this year, commented Richard Blackwood, an important investor, leaning towards Carolina. Their approach to democratizing medical technology is revolutionary. Helena poked at her tenderloin, lost in thought. She remembered her own youth, the struggles to keep up appearances after her husband's untimely death, how she had carefully built up her social reputation, brick by brick, ensuring that Daniel had all the opportunities money could buy. "Excuse me." Carolina rose gracefully, heading for the small stage set up for the evening's speeches. The hall gradually fell silent. "Good evening, everyone." Her voice was clear and confident, echoing through the room. "We are here today not only to celebrate a milestone in medicine, but to reaffirm our commitment to the democratization of health." Helena watched, stunned, as Carolina masterfully led the audience through complex explanations of medical technology, survival statistics, and personal stories of patients who had benefited. Her eloquence was impeccable, her knowledge profound. "As a child," Carolina continued, her voice softening, "I lost my grandmother to a cancer that could have been treated if detected in time. She was a maid. She worked all her life to give me an education, but she never had access to the tests that today save lives." The silence in the hall was palpable. Helena felt something strange in her chest, a mixture of shame and admiration that she couldn't fully process. "The software we developed is being implemented in public hospitals across the country. Every life saved is a victory, not just for technology, but for the humanity that exists in each and every one of us." Loud applause filled the room. Helena saw her son, Daniel, stand up first, followed quickly by the entire room. The pride in his eyes was evident, directed not at his mother, as it used to be, but at the woman on stage. After the speech, Helena escaped to her private office in the club, needing a moment of solitude. The mahogany-paneled walls, which had always brought her comfort, now seemed suffocating. "Ma'am," Margaret, his personal assistant for 2 decades, entered quietly. "I've found the information you requested about Miss Carolina." Helena took the offered folder with trembling hands. There was the whole story: an honors degree from MIT, a master's degree from Stanford, several innovation awards, registered patents, philanthropic work, an impeccable trajectory. "She built all this on her own," Margaret murmured, breaking the protocol of years of discretion. "She started the company in a tiny apartment in the Bronx, turned down several investors who wanted majority control." "Why are you telling me this, Margaret?" "Because in 20 years, Ma'am, I've never seen you make such a serious error of judgment as you did today." The words hit Helena like a slap. She slumped into her leather armchair, the briefcase still in her hands, while memories of her own struggle after early widowhood flooded her mind. She had been no different from Carolina's grandmother, working tirelessly to secure a better future for her son. The irony of the situation suffocated her. In her stubborn quest to keep up appearances, to protect her son from what she considered inferior, she had become exactly the kind of person she had once despised. Those who had judged her when she was just a young widow trying to survive in high society. "Dinner is finishing, Ma'am," Margaret informed her softly. "The guests have begun to say goodbye." Helena remained seated, the tears finally escaping from her perfectly made-up eyes, staining the report that detailed the extraordinary life story of the woman she had tried to humiliate. The morning after the gala, Daniel crossed the corridors of the Presbyterian Hospital with heavy steps. The white coat, normally a symbol of pride, seemed to weigh tons on his shoulders. The images of the night before, the look of pain in Carolina's eyes, his mother's arrogance still haunted him. "Dr. Montero," called out head nurse Rosalie, interrupting his thoughts. "Your first patient is ready for surgery." Daniel nodded mechanically, heading for the preparation room. While he was washing his hands with methodical movements, his cell phone vibrated in his pocket. It was a message from his mother. "We need to talk. Lunch today." He ignored the message, concentrating on the procedure in front of him. Heart surgery required total focus, and today, more than ever, he needed that distraction. 4 hours later, after a successful operation, Daniel found refuge on the hospital terrace, the same place where, months ago, he had met Carolina for the first time during that medical conference that would change his life. "I thought I'd find you here." The familiar voice of Dr. Lawrence Pierce, his mentor, broke the silence. The older doctor, with his grey hair and kind eyes, approached offering a cup of coffee. "I heard about what happened at the gala." Daniel accepted the coffee, allowing the warmth of the drink to warm his cold hands. News flies fast. Your mother was always traditional, Lawrence commented cautiously, but that doesn't justify— No, it doesn't, Daniel interrupted, his voice laced with bitterness. Do you know what's worse? Seeing Carolina, a brilliant woman who revolutionized modern medicine, reduced to stereotypes because of the color of her skin. Lawrence watched his former resident for a moment. How did you meet? You never told me the details. Daniel smiled slightly, the first genuine display of joy that day. It was right here, during the Innovations in Cardiac Diagnostics conference. She was presenting TechCare's new software, and I, like an arrogant idiot, questioned the effectiveness of the system. I remember that presentation, Lawrence laughed. She put you in your place with impressive data and statistics. Exactly. It was the first time someone left me speechless in a medical discussion. Daniel smiled at the memory. Then I found her here on the terrace, working on her laptop. We started talking about the future of medicine, about how technology could democratize access to healthcare. His voice faltered as he remembered the passion in Carolina's eyes as they discussed their projects. She made me question everything I thought I knew about privilege and opportunity, and your mother can't see beyond her own prejudices, Lawrence added softly. Exactly. Helena Montero, the grande dame of New York society, can't accept that her only son has fallen in love with a black woman. Daniel ran his hands over his face, exhausted. It doesn't matter that Carolina is more successful than me, that she has saved more lives with her technology than I ever will with my surgeries. His cell phone vibrated again, another message from his mother. Daniel ignored it once again. You need to talk to her, Lawrence advised. Helena may be prejudiced, but she loves you. Maybe if you— Love, Daniel laughed bitterly. Love shouldn't come with conditions, Lawrence. Love shouldn't humiliate the people we love. Just then, his medical beeper sounded, an emergency in the emergency room. Daniel stood up quickly, adjusting his lab coat. Thanks for the coffee and the chat, he said, heading for the door. But he stopped before he left, turning to his mentor. You know what's ironic? My mother always taught me about excellence, about striving for the best. Carolina is exactly that, the best in her field, the best person I've ever met. But apparently, excellence only matters when it comes in the right color. Walking down the stairs towards the emergency room, Daniel felt the weight of his own words. His phone vibrated for the third time, now a call from his mother. Once again, he ignored it. In the emergency room, an elderly woman had been admitted with cardiac symptoms. While examining the patient, Daniel noticed that the initial diagnosis had been made by TechCare's software. The system had detected an anomaly that could have gone unnoticed in conventional examinations. Thank God for the new system, commented Nurse Rosalie. It saved another life today. Daniel felt a lump in his throat. Carolina's work was there, saving lives silently, without discrimination, without prejudice. The technology she had developed didn't ask about the patient's skin color, social class, or surname. Her phone vibrated once more. Helena was persistent. She always had been. But this time, Daniel needed to be stronger than her persistence. Some wounds needed time to heal, and others needed to be exposed to really heal. Helena watched her reflection in the mirror of the Victorian dressing table, an heirloom from her maternal grandmother. The first light of morning seeped through the silk curtains, mercilessly revealing the dark circles under her eyes that the night's sleep had left behind. Her hands trembled slightly as she applied her anti-aging cream imported from Switzerland, a morning ritual that today seemed strangely futile. Ma'am, Margaret quietly entered the room carrying a breakfast tray that was practically untouched. Young Daniel still hasn't returned any of your messages. Helena closed her eyes for a moment, feeling the weight of her son's silence. He's always been stubborn, Margaret. Just like his father. If I may, Mum, Margaret hesitated, breaking decades of formality. Perhaps it's time to consider that stubbornness isn't the problem. The comment hung in the air like smoke, suffocating and impossible to ignore. Helena stood up abruptly, walking over to the window overlooking Central Park. Below, people were going about their morning routines, oblivious to the whirlwind unfolding in the Park Avenue apartment. Do you remember when Daniel was little, Margaret? Helena asked softly. How he used to run down these corridors after Richard. Her voice faltered at the mention of her late husband's name. 25 years had passed since the accident that had taken him, but the pain was still present. I remember it well, Mum, Margaret replied. The boy was only 7 years old. You did everything to protect him. Protect? Helena repeated the word, as if testing its taste. It's funny how our attempts to protect can end up hurting those we love. Walking to her private library, Helena stopped in front of a framed photograph, her and Richard on their wedding day, young and radiant. Next to it, a more recent photo of Daniel at his graduation from medical school. "You know, Margaret, I spent the whole night researching Carolina," Helena confessed, her voice low. "I read every article, every interview. I watched her lectures online." Margaret remained silent, watching her boss carefully. "She's extraordinary," Helena continued, the word coming out like a painful confession. "Her work has saved thousands of lives, and I treated her as if she were, as you were treated when you arrived in New York," Margaret added softly. Helena turned abruptly, surprised by her housekeeper's audacity. "Yes, ma'am, I remember," Margaret continued. "A young Portuguese widow, struggling to keep her place in society. How many doors were closed? How many looks of contempt did you face?" Tears began to run down Helena's perfectly made-up face. "I promised myself that Daniel would never go through that he would always belong, always be accepted, and in the process, Mom, it turned out to be what I feared most." Helena's phone vibrated, a notification from the New York Times. On the screen, a photo of Carolina in her office at Tech Care, revolutionizing medicine, how a black woman is democratizing medical diagnosis. Helena scrolled down to read the article, each word amplifying her shame. Carolina talked about her grandmother, about growing up in the Bronx, about using technology to create bridges where there were walls. "Margaret," Helena called out, her voice trembling, "do you think that it's too late?" The housekeeper approached, placing a comforting hand on her mistress's shoulder. "It's never too late to recognize our mistakes, ma'am. The question is, are you prepared to do more than just acknowledge them?" Helena wiped away her tears, determined. "Get the car ready. I need to go to Tech Care." "Ma'am," Margaret warned gently, "perhaps you'd better first—" "No," Helena interrupted, her voice firm. "I've spent my whole life hiding behind social protocols and expectations. It's time to do things differently." As she prepared to leave, Helena stopped once again in front of the mirror. The reflection she found was no longer that of the impeccable society lady, but that of a woman confronting her own contradictions. "Are you sure?" Margaret asked, handing her the bag. "No," Helena admitted, "but for the first time in a long time, I'm sure I need to do this." The sound of her heels echoed through the corridors of the apartment as she made her way to the elevator. In her heart, a silent battle raged between the pride of a lifetime and the painful awareness of her mistakes. The Tech Care Solutions building stood out against the landscape of Manhattan's financial district, its glass walls reflecting the autumn sky. Helena remained inside the Bentley for a few minutes, observing the constant flow of people entering and leaving the building. Young professionals of different ethnicities, all carrying badges with the company's minimalist logo. "Ma'am," his driver, George, broke the silence. "Would you like me to accompany you?" Helena adjusted the sapphire brooch on her Chanel blazer, familiar armor in unfamiliar territory. "No, George. Some battles we have to face alone." The lobby was a study in modernity and inclusion. On the walls, monitors displayed real-time statistics of lives saved by the company's software. Photographs of patients from different social and ethnic backgrounds shared their stories of survival. "Can I help you?" asked the receptionist, a young Asian woman with purple hair and discreet piercings, something Helena would never allow at her social events. "Yes, I'd like to speak to Carol." Helena hesitated, realizing she didn't know the full surname of the woman her son loved. "Miss Carolina, the CEO." The receptionist arched an eyebrow. "Dr. Carolina Santos is in an important meeting. Do you have an appointment?" "No, but—" Helena straightened her shoulders. "Tell her Helena Montero is here." Recognition crossed the receptionist's face, followed by something that looked like disapproval. "One moment, please." While she waited, Helena observed a family in the lobby, parents clearly from humble backgrounds talking to a doctor through an interactive screen. Tech Care's software was translating the conversation in real time from Spanish to English. "Mrs. Montero," a firm voice called out. It wasn't Carolina, but a middle-aged black woman with an executive bearing. "I'm Dr. Olivia Washington, Director of Operations at Tech Care. Carolina is unavailable at the moment." "I see," Helena replied, feeling the bitter taste of rejection. "Could you at least let her know I was here?" "Actually," Olivia crossed her arms. Carolina authorized me to speak to you on her behalf. Perhaps we could talk in my office? Olivia's office was spacious, overlooking the Hudson River. On the walls, diplomas from Harvard and Stanford shared space with photographs of humanitarian projects. Carolina told me about the incident at the gala, Olivia began bluntly. We've been working together for 5 years. She's more than a brilliant CEO. She's a visionary who has turned personal tragedy into hope for millions. Helena sat down stiffly. I've come to apologize in person. Apologies, Olivia repeated thoughtfully. You know, Miss Montero, Carolina has faced prejudice all her life. In college, in corporate circles, in every boardroom where they tried to diminish her, but she turned every no into fuel for her mission. I didn't know, Helena muttered. Of course you didn't know, Olivia replied. People like you rarely know. They're too busy protecting their privileges to see the damage they do. The silence that followed was deafening. Helena felt every word like a stab of truth. When I met your son, Olivia continued, softening her tone slightly, I noticed something different about Carolina. She smiled more, hummed in the corridors. Daniel made her believe that maybe, just maybe, love could transcend prejudices. And I destroyed that belief, Helena added, her voice breaking. Exactly. Olivia leaned forward. Do you know what Carolina did after the gala? She spent the whole night here, working on a new algorithm to detect congenital heart defects in underprivileged communities, turning pain into purpose, as she always did. Helena felt tears burn her eyes. Please, I need to talk to her. Not today, Olivia replied firmly. Carolina is in a video conference with the WHO about implementing our software in developing countries. Her work is bigger than personal grievances. Helena stood up, defeated. At the door, however, Olivia stopped her. Ms. Montero, one last thing. She handed over a USB stick. Here's our corporate presentation. I suggest you watch it. Perhaps it will help you understand that a person's value is not measured by their surname or skin color, but by the impact they have on the world. In the car, on her way home, Helena plugged the pen drive into her tablet. Carolina's voice filled the space, talking about dreams, perseverance, and social transformation through technology. In one of the presentations, she quoted her grandmother, My granddaughter, don't let them tell you that you don't belong. Make your own place in the world. Helena cried silently, realizing that her pride had cost her not only her relationship with her son, but also the opportunity to meet a truly extraordinary woman. Carolina stood motionless in front of the window of her penthouse in Tribeca, watching the fine rain falling over Manhattan. In her hands, a cup of chamomile tea was slowly cooling, forgotten as her mind wandered over the events of the last few days. You didn't have to protect me, she said without turning around. Olivia was sitting on the modern sofa in the living room, reviewing reports from the meeting with the WHO. I wasn't protecting you, Olivia replied, closing her laptop. I was giving Helena Montero a lesson in humility. Carolina finally turned around, a sad smile playing on her lips. You've always been my fierce guardian, ever since you hired me as an intern, and I will continue to be. Olivia stood up, approaching her protege and friend. But you need to know, she sounded genuinely sorry. Carolina's phone vibrated for the 10th time that day. It was Daniel again. Since the gala, he had alternated between messages of support and apologies for his mother's attitude. Carolina hadn't replied to any of them. Do you know what's most ironic? Carolina began, placing the cold cup on the coffee table. When I created the early diagnosis algorithm, I thought I had finally found a way to transcend prejudices. Technology doesn't discriminate, it doesn't judge by skin color. But people still do, Olivia added softly. Exactly. Carolina walked over to her bookshelf, picking up a framed photograph. In it, a black lady with gray hair was smiling, wearing a maid's uniform. Grandma Conceição always said that education was the only thing no one could take away from me, but she never mentioned how lonely it would be at the top. The intercom rang, interrupting the conversation. It was the doorman, announcing Daniel's arrival. Do you want me to ask him to come up? Olivia asked, observing Carolina's hesitation. After a moment's silence, Carolina nodded. Minutes later, Daniel emerged from the elevator, looking exhausted after a shift at the hospital. His eyes met Carolina's, filled with worry and guilt. I'll let you two talk, Olivia announced, collecting her things. As she passed Daniel, she stopped briefly. She's the best human being I know. Don't hurt her anymore. When they were alone, the silence hung between them like a lead curtain. I received an interesting notification today, Carolina finally said, picking up her tablet. Your department at Presbyterian has implemented our full-time cardiac diagnostic software. Was that you? Daniel ran his hands through his hair, a nervous gesture she already knew well. The preliminary results were impressive. We saved 3 lives this week that would have been lost with traditional methods. So now I'm good enough to save lives, but not to sit at your family's table. The harshness in Carolina's words made Daniel recoil as if he had been slapped. Carol, you know I don't think so, he protested, stepping closer. My mother, she's trapped in the prejudices of a different generation, but she went to tech care today. You know, I know, Carolina replied, crossing her arms. Olivia told me her mother wanted to apologize. Doesn't that mean anything to you? Carolina closed her eyes for a moment, holding back the tears that threatened to fall. It means that she finally realized that she had publicly humiliated someone with social influence. But what if I was just the granddaughter of the maid? What if I hadn't built tech care? Would my value be less? Daniel remained silent, her words echoing painfully. Do you know what hurts the most, Daniel? She continued, her voice trembling slightly. It's that for a moment when we were together, I forgot that the world still sees me like this. I forgot that for some people, no matter how many lives I save or how many companies I build, I'll always be the intruder, the one who doesn't belong. Carol, Daniel tried to move closer, but she held up her hand, keeping her distance. I need time, she declared firmly. Time to understand if I can be part of a family that sees me as a stain on their social history. I love you, Daniel said simply, his voice charged with emotion. I love you too, Carolina replied, finally letting the tears fall. But sometimes love isn't enough. Sometimes we need respect, dignity, and genuine acceptance. The rain outside intensified, as if the sky shared the pain present in that room. Daniel stood still, defeated, while Carolina turned her attention to the wet city beyond the window. Grandma used to say that some wounds need to bleed before they heal, she muttered, more to herself than to him. Maybe that's what we're living through now. The cab snaked through the narrow streets of the Bronx, leaving behind the opulence of Manhattan. Helena looked out of the window at the worn facades of the buildings, the small family businesses, and the children playing on the cracked sidewalks. After a week of insomnia and self-recrimination, she had made an impulsive decision. She needed to know Carolina's roots. The address in her hands led her to a modest building on East 167th Street. A faded sign read, Donna Conceicon Community Center. Helena hesitated before climbing the worn steps to the entrance. Can I help you? Asked a middle-aged black woman who was organizing clothing donations in the lobby. Yes, I'm looking for information about Carolina Santos, Helena replied, feeling out of place in her Prada ensemble. The woman studied her for a moment, her eyes revealing recognition. You're Dr. Daniel's mother. Helena felt her face burn. How? News travels fast in our community, the woman replied, introducing herself. I'm Ruby Williams, the center's coordinator. I met Carolina when she was a little girl, always clinging to Donna Conceição's skirts. So you knew her grandmother? Conceição? Ruby smiled nostalgically. That woman was a hurricane of determination. She cleaned houses during the day, ran the center at night, and still found time to teach Carolina to dream big. Ruby led Helena through the center, showing her a small library. This is where it all began. Carolina would spend hours studying while waiting for her grandmother to finish her volunteer work. By the age of 12, she was teaching math to the other children. Helena stopped in front of a wall of photos. In one of them, a teenage Carolina was smiling next to a gray-haired lady, both holding a math Olympiad trophy. Donna Conceição saved every penny to buy Carolina her first computer, Ruby continued. She worked twice as hard, taking on any extra cleaning. My granddaughter is going to change the world, she always said. And she has, Helena murmured, her voice breaking. Yes, but she paid a high price, Ruby replied, her tone hardening. Do you know how many times I saw that girl cry after being humiliated at internship interviews? How many doors were slammed in her face because of the color of her skin? Helena felt every word like a dagger. I made a terrible mistake. Yes, you did, Ruby agreed. But you're here now, and that means something. They arrived at a modern computer room in stark contrast to the rest of the building. Carolina donated these computers. She installed our first telemedicine system. Every week, volunteer doctors do online consultations for our community. And the name of the center? Helena asked softly. It was renamed after Donna Conceicão's death, Ruby explained. Carolina wanted to honor her grandmother's legacy. That woman had no money or social status, but she had something much more valuable: the ability to see beyond appearances and believe in people's potential. Helena sat down in one of the chairs in the living room, feeling the weight of her actions. How can I fix this, Ruby? Maybe the question isn't how to fix it, but how to learn, Ruby replied, taking a seat next to her. You know, Donna Conceicão used to say that prejudice is like a hereditary disease. It passes from generation to generation until someone is brave enough to break the cycle. Just then, a group of children entered the room for their programming lesson. Helena watched as they settled down animatedly in front of the computers, their faces reflecting the same determination she saw in the photos of young Carolina. Carolina comes here every Thursday, Ruby commented. She teaches the children basic programming. She says she's planting seeds of transformation. Helena discreetly checked her Cartier. It was Thursday. She'll be here in an hour, Ruby informed her, as if reading her thoughts. The question is, are you ready for this meeting? Helena looked at the children once more, seeing in their hopeful eyes the same sparkle that Carolina carried. She realized that she was faced with a choice. She could remain stuck in the prejudices she had inherited, or she could, as Ruby suggested, be brave enough to break the cycle. I don't know if I'm ready, Helena admitted honestly, but I know I need to be here. Ruby smiled, a smile that carried decades of wisdom. Then stay. Sometimes the first step towards change is simply being present in the right place, even if it's uncomfortable. Carolina parked her Tesla in front of the Donna Conceicão Community Center, as she did every Thursday. The day had been particularly exhausting. Meetings with investors, presentations to the FDA, and the constant pressure of being a CEO in the spotlight. But there, in that piece of the Bronx, she always found her center. When she entered the building, however, something was different. Ruby was waiting for her in the lobby with an expression that mixed concern and expectation. She's here, Ruby said simply. Carolina didn't need to ask who. Her heart raced, a mixture of apprehension and surprise taking over her body. In the computer room, Ruby nodded. He arrived an hour ago. He spent the whole time watching the children, listening to stories about you and your grandmother. For a moment, Carolina considered turning around. It would have been easier to run away, to avoid another confrontation, another possible humiliation. But her grandmother's voice echoed in her mind. Never let fear determine your steps, my child. Have the children started school yet? She asked, unconsciously adjusting her blazer. So they're waiting for you, Ruby replied, gently squeezing her arm. And Carolina, sometimes people surprise you. Upon entering the computer room, Carolina was greeted by the usual chorus of Aunt Carol from the children, but her eyes immediately met the elegant figure of Helena Montero sitting discreetly at the back of the room. Today, Carolina began, forcing herself to keep her voice steady, we're going to learn about pattern recognition algorithms. Does anyone know what a pattern is? As she led the class, Carolina felt Helena's gaze on her. It was different from the look of contempt at the gala. There was something else there, something she couldn't decipher. An hour later, when the children began to say goodbye, Helena remained seated. Carolina finally allowed herself to look at her directly. Why are you here? She asked, her voice low but firm. Helena stood up slowly, her eyes scanning the room. Because I needed to understand. Understand what? Everything, Helena replied, her voice trembling slightly. Your story. This place. She paused, taking a deep breath. My mistakes. Carolina crossed her arms, an automatic defensive posture. And what do you understand? That I'm the product of generations of privilege and prejudice, Helena began, her words carefully chosen. That I spent so long protecting Daniel from a world I considered inferior, that I became exactly the kind of person who once hurt me. What do you mean? Helena approached one of the photos on the wall, the same one she had looked at earlier. When Richard, Daniel's father, died, I faced society's prejudice, a young widow of Portuguese origin, trying to keep her place in the world of the elite. I promised myself that Daniel would never go through that. So you built walls, Carolina concluded. Yes, Helena admitted. Walls so high that I didn't realize I was imprisoning my own son and hurting someone extraordinary in the process. Carolina felt tears forming but held them back. Do you know what hurt the most that night? It wasn't the public humiliation. It was seeing the same look in his eyes that I've faced all my life, as if I were less than human. I'm so sorry, Helena whispered, her own tears now flowing freely. Deeply, truly sorry. There's no excuse for what I did. No, there isn't, Carolina agreed. But you're here. I am, Helena confirmed. And if you allow me, I'd like to learn. About yourself, about this place, about how to be better. Carolina observed the woman in front of her, no longer the intimidating figure from the gala, but someone vulnerable, exposing her own wounds. My grandmother used to say that people are like trees, Carolina said after a long silence. Some grow crooked because of the environment, but there's always a chance to straighten the trunk if there's a real will. Your grandmother seemed like a very wise woman, Helena commented softly. She was, Carolina smiled slightly. And you know what else she used to say? That forgiveness isn't a weakness, it's a strength, but it has to be earned. Helena nodded, understanding the weight of those words. I'm willing to earn it, Carolina. Not just for Daniel, but because I've realized that I need to be better. For myself, for the world I want to leave behind. The last lights of the day penetrated through the windows of the community center, creating long shadows on the floor. Two women from seemingly different worlds met in a moment of raw truth and the possibility of redemption. Daniel watched the city through the window of his office at Presbyterian Hospital, the lights of Manhattan beginning to dot the evening sky. On his desk, the latest tech care software report showed impressive figures, 15 early diagnoses in just 1 week, lives saved by Carolina's technology. Her phone vibrated. A message from her mother. We need to talk. Come home for dinner tonight. It's important. He hesitated, his thumb hovering over the screen. The last few weeks had been an exercise in deliberate distancing, a form of silent protest against decades of veiled prejudice that had finally come to light. Dr. Montero? His assistant interrupted his thoughts. Your last patient of the day has arrived. The patient was a black woman in her 70s, accompanied by her teenage granddaughter. TechCare's software had detected a heart abnormality during a routine examination at a community clinic in the Bronx. Mrs. Johnson, Daniel began, studying the results. Thanks to early diagnosis, we can treat your condition less invasively. It was that new system, wasn't it? His granddaughter asked, her eyes sparkling with interest. Dr. Carolina Santos. Daniel felt his heart squeeze. Yes, exactly. I met her at the Donna Concepcion Community Center, the girl continued excitedly. She teaches programming there. Did you know that your mother came by last week? Daniel froze. How? Your mother, Mrs. Montero, the girl elaborated. She spent the whole afternoon at the center, talking to Ruby about Dr. Carolina's story. She even stayed for her programming class. The rest of the appointment passed like a blur. Daniel barely registered the procedures he explained, his mind spinning with this new information. His mother, Helena Montero, in the Bronx, voluntarily. When the last patient left, he finally answered the message. I'll be there at 8. The apartment on Park Avenue hadn't changed. Same old furniture, same carefully selected works of art, same air of refined opulence, but something was different. Daniel, his mother greeted him at the door, her face showing a vulnerability he rarely saw. In the dining room, the table was set for 2, not with the usual full silverware, but in a simpler, almost intimate way. I've made feijoada, Helena announced, surprising him. Ruby gave me the recipe. Apparently it was Carolina's grandmother's favorite. Daniel sat down, stunned. Mom, what's going on? Helena poured the wine before answering. I'm learning, son, painfully, belatedly, but learning. She told us about her visit to the community center, about the stories she'd heard, about seeing Carolina teaching the children. Her voice trembled occasionally, charged with restrained emotion. Do you know what struck me most? Helena continued, playing with her napkin. The way those children look at you, with the same admiration you had in your eyes when you talked about her at the gala. And I was so blind. Why are you telling me this now? Because I realized that I'm not just losing a potential daughter-in-law, Helena replied, tears starting to form. I'm losing my son. And more than that, I'm losing the chance to be a better person. Daniel watched his mother, always so composed, so controlled, let the tears flow freely. Carolina showed me something at the center, Helena continued, a project she's developing, a telemedicine system specifically for underprivileged communities, integrating diagnostic software with remote care. The Concepcion project, Daniel added. She told me about it. Yes. And you know what I realized? While I was busy protecting our social status, she made quotation marks in the air, Carolina was literally saving lives. changing the world. Daniel felt his own throat tighten. She's extraordinary. Yes, she is, Helena agreed softly. And I almost deprived our family, of someone like that because of old-fashioned prejudices. Dinner progressed at a different pace than usual. There wasn't the usual formality, the superficial conversations about social events. Instead, mother and son shared long suppressed truths. "I love her, Mom," Daniel finally declared, "not just for what she does, but for who she is." "I know," Helena replied, "and now I understand why." She paused, taking a sip of wine. Do you think she could give me a second chance?" Daniel studied his mother for a long moment. "That depends, Mom. Are you really ready to change? Not just for me, but for yourself." "I'm learning to be," Helena answered honestly, "and for the first time in my life, I'm not afraid of that change." The Metropolitan Hospital auditorium was packed that December morning. Carolina adjusted the microphone on her blazer, looking out at the diverse audience. Doctors, nurses, hospital administrators, and, most importantly, representatives of underprivileged communities from all over the city. "The Concession Project," she began, her voice firm, "is not just a telemedicine system. It's a bridge between worlds that for too long have been separated by invisible walls of privilege and prejudice." In the front row, Daniel smiled encouragingly. Next to him, to the surprise of many, was Helena Montero, elegant as ever, but with a different attitude, more open, more present. "When my grandmother fell ill," Carolina continued, "she faced not only the illness but a health system that treated people like her, poor, black, working class, as second-class citizens. Today, through technology, we can begin to correct this historical injustice." The images on the big screen showed how the new system worked. Remote consultations, real-time diagnoses, continuous monitoring of patients. But there was something more. "And it is with great pride that I announce our newest partnership." Carolina paused significantly. "The Montero Foundation has joined the Conception Project as a principal investor, guaranteeing the system's implementation in all of New York's underserved communities over the next 5 years." A buzz went through the auditorium. Helena remained upright in her chair, her eyes shining with something that looked like pride, not the social pride of before, but something deeper, truer. After the presentation, as the guests dispersed for cocktails, Carolina was approached by a reporter from the New York Times. "Dr. Santos, how did this unlikely partnership with the Montero Foundation come about?" Carolina exchanged a complicit glance with Helena, who was approaching. "Sometimes," she replied, "the greatest transformations begin with small gestures of humility and courage. And sometimes," Helena added, surprising everyone by holding Carolina's hand, "we need to allow ourselves to be transformed by extraordinary people." Later, on the hospital terrace, Carolina found a moment of stillness. The New York sky was exceptionally clear, the stars visible despite the city lights. "Grandma would be proud," she muttered to herself. "I'm sure she would," Helena's voice sounded behind her. "Not just of the project, but of you." Carolina turned around to find her future mother-in-law, a word that still sounded strange in her mind, holding 2 glasses of champagne. "You know," Helena continued, offering Carolina a glass, "I've spent my whole life building walls to protect what I thought was important. I never realized that I was only imprisoning myself. Walls can become bridges," Carolina replied softly, "when we allow ourselves to see the other side." "Daniel told me about the marriage proposal," Helena commented after a moment of contemplative silence. Carolina unconsciously touched the ring on her finger, a discreet solitaire that Daniel had given her the week before during an intimate dinner. "He's radiant," Helena smiled. "And for the first time in a long time, I'm not worried about what society will think. I'm just happy." "It feels good, doesn't it?" Carolina smiled back. "That freedom. It's liberating," Helena agreed, "but also scary, like any real change." Just then, Daniel joined them on the terrace, bringing with him Ruby and Olivia, who had attended the presentation. "A toast," proposed Ruby, raising her glass, "to bridges built over chasms of prejudice." "To new beginnings," added Olivia. "To family," Helena added, her voice breaking, "in all its forms and colors." Carolina looked at the small group gathered there, their past and future intertwined in a way she had never imagined possible. She thought of her grandmother, how she always said that true love had the power to transform not just hearts, but entire worlds. "Transformation," she finally toasted, "and the courage to allow it to happen." The glasses clinked under the starry Manhattan sky, while below them, on the hospital monitors, the Conceição project quietly began its mission to create a fairer, more equal world, one diagnosis at a time. The Dona Conceição Community Center was unrecognizable that Saturday morning. Garlands of white flowers and purple orchids, Carolina's grandmother's favorites, decorated the normally austere walls. The small inner courtyard had been transformed into a makeshift altar, with white chairs arranged in a semicircle. Carolina watched everything through the window of the room that had once been her grandmother's office, now converted into a space for the bride to get ready. Ruby was adjusting the last details of her dress, elegant in its simplicity, with delicate lace reminiscent of the towel patterns that Dona Conceição loved so much. "Your grandmother would be thrilled," Ruby commented, adjusting her veil. "A wedding here, in the center she built with so much love." "It was Helena's idea, you know," Carolina revealed, still surprised by the suggestion her mother-in-law had made 2 months earlier. She said that no ballroom could be more meaningful. As if summoned by the mention of her name, Helena entered the room, carrying a small blue velvet box. "Something old," she said, opening the box to reveal a delicate pearl necklace. "It was my grandmother's. It passed to my mother, then to me. Now it's yours." Carolina felt the tears threaten to ruin her makeup. "Helena, Shh," Helena interrupted her gently, moving to put the necklace on. "Family is family. And you, my dear, are family now." Ruby discreetly wiped away a tear, observing the scene. "Dona Conceição always said that true love has the power to break down any barrier." "She was right," Helena replied, adjusting the necklace around Carolina's neck. How right she was about so many things. A soft knock on the door announced the arrival of Olivia, stunning in her bridesmaid's dress. "It's time." Carolina took a deep breath, looking at herself one last time in the mirror. The reflection showed not just a bride, but all the women who had helped her get there. Her grandmother's strength, Ruby's loyalty, Olivia's fierce protection, and now Helena's transformed love. In the courtyard, the guests represented the bridge that Carolina and Daniel had built between worlds. Doctors from Presbyterian Hospital sitting next to Bronx residents. Tech care executives mingling with children from the programming program. Manhattan high society sharing smiles with volunteers from the community center. The music started, not the traditional wedding march, but a soft bossa nova that her grandmother used to hum while she worked. Carolina began her walk down the makeshift aisle, each step carrying the weight of her journey. Daniel was waiting for her at the altar, his eyes shining with restrained tears. Next to him, Dr. Lawrence Pierce smiled proudly as best man. In the front row, Helena held Ruby's hand, two women who once seemed to belong to different universes, now united by the transformation that true love brings. "We are gathered today," the celebrant began, "not only to unite Daniel and Carolina in marriage, but to celebrate the power of love to transcend barriers, heal wounds, and build bridges." Carolina looked at Daniel, seeing in his eyes the reflection of her own heart, full of hope, gratitude, and unconditional love. On the walls of the center, the photographs of Dona Conceição seemed to smile, silent witnesses to a circle that was finally coming full circle. "Love," continued the celebrant, "knows no color, class, or prejudice. Love in its purest form is a force for transformation." Helena, sitting in the front row, held a handkerchief embroidered with Dona Conceição's initials, a gift Ruby had given her the previous morning. On her face, tears of joy marked the path of her own transformation. When it came to their vows, Carolina and Daniel opted for simple, true words that echoed not only their love for each other, but their commitment to the change they represented. "For you," Daniel promised, "I have learned that love is courage." "With you," Carolina replied, "I've learned that transformation is possible." The rings they exchanged were simple, white gold with a small sapphire, Dona Conceição's favorite stone. Inside, engraved in delicate letters, was a message, "Bridges over abysses." When the celebrant pronounced them husband and wife, the applause that followed was not just for the bride and groom, but for every person in the room who had contributed to making that moment possible. It was a celebration of love, yes, but also of courage, transformation, and hope. At one point in the story, Helena says, "I spent my whole life building walls to protect what I thought was important. I never realized that I was only imprisoning myself." What walls have you built in your own life, thinking you were protecting yourself, but which may actually be preventing you from having transformative experiences? Your participation in the channel is very important. Leave your opinion in the comments. Thank you so much for watching until the end. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to subscribe to the channel. Leave a like and comment your thoughts. Your participation is very important to us. See you next time.